Hello, everybody. Welcome to the new episode of Everything Websites. So, my name is Stefan. As you know, I'm your host. And actually, it's a bit different because now I'm having videos. Didn't have it before. So, let's see how this is going to play out. And today, I have a very special guest. So, her name is Emily Lonetto, and she's leading agency partners and community growth for Webflow. So, Emily, welcome. Thanks for joining the show.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So, the idea is for us to just discuss a bit about Webflow, and I want to start with something that maybe a bit of a past of Webflow, because Webflow in the past had a kind of different direction strategy. I know that people in the past was saying that Webflow is kind of built to build no-code web apps, and then Webflow switched, and now they don't do that. I mean, especially because you guys canceled the logic and that kind of stuff. So maybe a bit of that. So maybe why shifting to some kind of stuff like that, and just went to the websites building.
Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting thing where it's like, I think like many of us in the community have been using Webflow for years. Like I myself started in like 2016. There are folks that have been at the company even for over 10 years. It's crazy to kind of see how much that's changed. If you even just
Yeah.
like think about 10 years and everything that has evolved.
Yeah.
So like for Webflow, it started off in a way where you just built static landing pages, kind of more of like the brochure style sites that then evolved when we like introduced the CMS ages ago. And that's really where like that unlock happened. And I think where a lot of the explosion of Webflow really occurred of, okay, cool, wait, so I can do this, but also really think about it from a logic perspective. I can think about it more like code. And that became very much so like the sweet spot of Webflow of we were always very much so pioneers of the no code era, but I would argue Webflow's kind of always been more in like the low code space since it first came out, just based off of like the logic that it used or the types of users that I think like just really become obsessed with it. And I think that kind of is what brings us to today. What you just spoke about was kind of like a slight shift in our mission away from kind of being straight no code and really trying to bring in some of these other types of ways that people can build and layer in like logic or memberships. And I think one of the big things that we really realized as we really started to scale is that we want to make sure that Webflow is like that hub for really making sure that that design experience is really strong, the customization you get with code is really strong, and the platform that we're building is able to really flex in the way that you as a designer or developer can choose the tools that you need to really scale from anything really small to something that's really big and robust. And when you really think about like logic or memberships, those are full-blown companies that solve those problems. You have like Zapier, who's incredible, and I'm sure there are lots of folks on here that talk about it. Same with Make. Then you've got like Outseta and MemberStack and all of these incredible things that exist, and we're really thankful for that. So as we started to kind of play and roll that out in beta, it made a lot more sense for us to really dive into that community extensibility and like flexibility mission so that we can make the platform very strong, our partnerships with those companies really strong, and also just give that same flexibility that code does to the folks that build on Webflow to use the infrastructure that they really need for those types of backend support and really dive deep into the design experience, the extensibility of our CMS, which like we love, our community loves, and hopefully that's something that you and I can talk through a little more.
Yeah. I mean, I really love the all this evolution of Webflow from the beginning, and I love that Webflow is now more focusing on this kind of like marketing teams, because it was a struggle before for non-technical people to use websites and do a lot of. Now it's basic stuff in Webflow, but it was pretty difficult before, and I don't think any platform managed to do that properly and seamlessly for, as I said, not technical people. In most cases, are marketing teams because they're mostly using this for. And I think it's amazing what Webflow have done over the past couple of years. Yeah, so maybe just a question. So regarding this collaboration between marketing and development. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess like it's funny for this one where for me, like it's just so core to the use case that I'm used to. Like I
Mm,
discovered Webflow as like a originally I was the solo or first marketer working on like a small startup, and my designer and my CTO came to me and was just like, okay, we're gonna shift off of WordPress onto Webflow, or if you want to look at other things, like you can, but like we really like Webflow. And at the time,
mhm,
like I was way deeper, like I think a lot of us, into like some of like the lower touch, very like high design focused ones like Squarespace, or even kind of playing around a little bit more with WordPress because like everyone just had to.
yeah, WordPress was just
And
a must.
like many folks, especially like from a marketing perspective, like I'm like, I know what I know. Like this isn't like what I do. I'm not a web designer.
Mm,
Like I want to learn this new tool. Obviously, you know how that story transforms because I'm clearly here, so clearly something clicked.
yeah.
But I think what that unlocked for me though is like a really strong understanding of, to your point, like websites are not just designers or developers working on them. Like there's the marketers, there's the content, there's brand teams, there's all these folks that really need to make this a strong artifact for a business. So I think where Webflow's sweet spot really is that we understand that we want to give a lot of that flexibility and give a little bit more control to folks that are non-technical, but also like appeal to developers who want to go like kind of above and beyond and play a little bit more in the space that they're familiar with code.
Mhm.
So I think some of the evolutions you've seen with Webflow, from redoing how we think about edit mode to having a lot more control over users' permissions and even just how we think about components, like those are all, especially even page building, I think is actually a fantastic example of
Yeah.
that, is like where like designers and developers are not only just like building for the end user of whatever that company is focused on, but they're also building for the marketer. And then the marketer is now
Mm.
building a lot more empathy and understanding of how to get in and work more in tandem with those teams, which is something that like me as somebody who has kind of like had that directly as part of my job for a while is just really exciting to see and is something I strongly believe in.
I really, there's so many exciting things for that Webflow produced. I think I love the most tiny but mighty updates
Yeah,
because,
me too.
yeah, because they're like tiny but not that tiny. It's something that people really needed all the time,
Mhm.
and the Webflow listened to the community, and over time, just did the update out of the blue when no one expected it, which is great. I do have one that I would really love Webflow to create one for the generating alt text, for example, for images, which is
Uh,
pretty annoying right now.
oh, I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah, but I hope that some kind of feature like that can be produced in the future. But anyway, I know that a lot of people are saying like, okay, so Webflow is great, but like a learning curve is a bit steep.
Mhm.
But I don't know about that because first I was trying WordPress and I gave up almost immediately because there is so many things going on. I cannot find anything. There's so many limitations. But that's when I tried to use Webflow, it was not like that. Because I'm a designer first, so everything reminded me of design, and it was much easier for me to find my way around. So, what do you think about this learning curve and new people learning this tool to use, even if maybe they are not designers and developers?
Totally. Like, I think, again, one of the things that's really interesting about Webflow is that it is kind of in that stage where it gives the flexibility of like, if you truly have no experience with code, like there is a path and you can do a lot with the tool. And then
Mhm.
it does allow you to really like flex up and get more familiar and kind of understand and unintentionally learn like code, which is a really interesting byproduct of Webflow. Um, I think the notion of like, is there a learning curve for Webflow? Like, yeah, there's definitely a learning curve for Webflow. It's a different tool. I think some designers, it really also depends on kind of what your design background is. So I
Yeah.
personally find like if you're coming from like print, graphic, more of that traditional side of design, like there is different kind of syntax that you think about when you are laying your design, or there are elements that you probably don't need to think about in the same way as when you think about building for code or building for something live in production
Right.
because of just like the rules of how things interact. And
Mm,
I think like to me, that's where a lot of the tension of the learning curve really happens, is that people as like humans have a lot of friction when it comes to like stark change. Webflow sits kind of somewhere in the middle, where it's kind of
mm,
like this isn't something that is entirely a different universe than what you are used to from a designer. And you could probably see a lot of similarities in other tools that you have, but it's a habit mask. It's like taking something that you're used to doing in a different way, maybe thinking about it slightly differently, and just kind of bumping that up to a slightly different capacity or different perspective. And
yeah.
often that is one of those things where you're met with a designer who has strong expertise in something. They know that thing will work elsewhere. They try that and it doesn't have the exact same behavior. And that creates what we
Yeah.
think is a learning curve.
Yeah.
And that's super natural. And I think that's where the folks that really dedicate into it and kind of start to take a step back and be like, okay, cool. Like, let me think about this as though, like, what am I building for? And what are the building blocks of that? In the same way we think about layers and maybe some of the shapes that you would use otherwise. And suddenly that
Mm,
becomes a lot easier. So,
mm,
yes, there's a learning curve.
mhm.
But I think like one of the things that I love about it is that it's like learning a new language in a very familiar place. And
Yeah.
that's really cool when you really think about it.
Well, I mean, it has to be a learning curve. No tool can be that simple that you can just see it and know
Totally.
how to
Otherwise,
use.
it's just
Yeah.
a replacement for something
Yeah.
that is a
Yeah.
carbon copy.
Or it just doesn't have enough features or stuff that you can edit and work with. So that's not a problem. I mean, what I
Mhm.
love the most is just that you have a lot of very good tutorials. For example, on
Mhm.
YouTube that Webflow made. I couldn't find that about almost any other platform before. I don't know now. WordPress, I think, never had it. I don't want to bash WordPress, but they do like with this kind of
Mhm.
stuff because you always get with finding some online YouTuber to learn from him, and maybe he doesn't cover everything. And this is like Webflow putting stuff out there for you to start with and to learn, and I think that's amazing. And yeah, so we also see there's a lot of new features coming up. I mean, a lot of them already came, like localization, long time ago now, and Webflow analyze and optimize. I didn't try all of them. Localization I did, but Webflow optimize actually sounds very promising. Are there any similar game-changing tools that are coming up? Maybe.
Well, you know very well there whenever there's big game changing things, those are not things I can necessarily
I
reveal
know.
until they are ready. But I think one of the big things that is like a meaningful shift when you look at kind of Webflow strategy and kind of where we see the web going is that we really want to equip folks that build, whether it's like on their team at a company or kind of as an agency or freelancer, to be able to do a lot more with the site that they build. And so when
Hmm.
you take a look at some of the things like localize, analyze, optimize, yes, they all rhyme, but they also extend the way that
Hmm.
you can do things with the site that you build. So what we're really excited about is continuing to kind of build into that mission of how do we make that site and the thing that you're building or selling to a client like infinitely more valuable, and how do you open up new services that you can offer so that you as let's say a freelancer or an agency can be more valuable long term, because that's ultimately where we see some of the trends as well with the importance of websites, also like the expertise and importance of agencies and freelancers, which is very clearly also a trend that I'm sure is close to you as well.
Yeah, I think what's most important is that the ecosystem of all of these things, so you don't need to go to look for another solution from
Mhm.
some other company or agency or whatever, which makes it complex and even more complex if you need to integrate with something, limitation that has and everything. So these kind of native solutions that Webflow is introducing are pretty awesome. And I'm really excited about the the AI because it looks very promising. It's not like some generic stuff that most of other platforms are doing. Just one click to generate a website, but it's actually very valuable things. And I'm very excited for the animations. I hope they're gonna come up
Yeah,
next
that
year.
is definitely one of the things that I think a lot of us are really excited about.
Yeah.
I've always, I think with both AI and animations, like animations is like a little bit more core to I think like OG Webflow of I remember when
Mm,
we first launched interactions and how insane that was for so many people.
yeah.
And being able to now work directly with the GSAP team on Webflow's team has been incredible. And we're really excited to breathe a lot of new life into that. In addition to, there's just incredible partners in our ecosystem today, like Lottie and Rive and Spline
Hmm.
and even like Blender. There's so many options. So I'm really excited to see what like a website experience kind of changes to. And I think a lot of that's going to have to do with things like that. So, like spatial design and animation. And then on your AI side, I like 100% agree.
Mm,
Like, let's face it, if everybody just wanted like a one button generator ready
that's
to
not gonna work.
publish, like then we would end up our web would look like it did when it first came out. Or
Mm,
like a series
yeah.
of like OG PowerPoint templates, if you
Yeah.
remember when
Exactly.
everything looked exactly the same. And I think taking more of that assisted approach and taking it more of like this is like a junior designer that you have or a junior developer is I think the right approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, uh, yeah, let's see how everything gonna play out. But it's really exciting to see all of this stuff. Uh, yeah, we'll see how this year gonna surprise us. But yeah, I wanna get back a bit on the marketing teams and everything. So how could someone that is not a developer and designer, I mean, what is the skill that should develop in order to uh, use Webflow effectively? Maybe,
As a marketer?
yeah, as a marketer, for example.
Yeah, so I think like the way that I would think about Webflow as a marketer is that it's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you are focused on your website as a channel, as a place to experiment, as a place to test your content, talk to your customers, like that, those are all of the things that you're regularly thinking about from a marketing perspective. So understanding Webflow, it's just a really awesome way to think about okay, what is that medium? What's the mechanism of which I can do this? And what are the tools that are now within that platform that give me and my team the flexibility to test or have agency or be able to kind of work in a way that we might not have been able to before. I think like
Yeah.
that's one way that I think about it when it's how do I fit into the problems that I might be thinking about or the solutions that I might want to do as a marketer. But I think like the other side is it's really, and I know it's cheesy because we say superpowers all the time at Webflow and then also on the internet, but I think it really is an awesome superpower as a marketer because it helps to also build what I like to call technical empathy, which is
Mm,
a really strong skill I personally value and I see in really strong marketers that I've worked with that these are folks that have taken the time to understand a skill set that they may never be the best designer or developer on the planet, or they may never be the best Webflow builder or connoisseur. But if they've taken the time to understand the logic, they're going to be infinitely better at understanding what's possible with it and working with team members that do. And I think that is also just a very strong skill set that we often don't think of when you're thinking about a marketing role because of how cross functional it is and how important it is to work with teams like this on a regular basis.
yeah. And then when we are there, I mean, just like a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I mean, because even if everything is needs, I mean, trying to be set in a way that they can do everything without developers and designers and stuff like that. So the marketing team internally can handle all this stuff, which they can do a lot of these things. But eventually they need to collaborate with developers and
100%.
designers and the Webflow agencies. So maybe what would be maybe your advice on how they can effectively collaborate with the agencies for these kind of things?
Yeah, I guess like number one, talking to all you marketers out there, don't break the builds that you paid for with the agencies. They don't like it, you don't like it. Please don't do that. Uh, but I think the things that I would say there is, um, I think the modern marketing team is a lot more agile than what we've seen in the past, and I think it would be wrong to assume that like you're ever going to be like done with your website. So there's never going to be a point where like, oh, I don't like
Never gonna be
need
done.
like a new version of this page, or I don't need components that my team needs to be able to work within. Like that job's never done. So I don't think there's ever a stage necessarily where the expectation is like a content marketer, for example, suddenly is also a website designer and is suddenly also doing those things.
Yeah.
So I think the way that I look at it is number one, being able to think really agile and think in what are the pages or the components that are going to be more evergreen versus places to experiment. That's kind of one way to think about it, and kind of where you're going to want to work and use the design and development talent that you have at your hands. And then I think the second part of that too is also just like think for scale. So often what we get into the habit of is, and this is also something that comes up all the time when I talk to agencies, and like they talk about like some of the things that they wish that they would see from marketing teams. So it's a both way thing, but um, often there's just this time pressure to always just get something out and get it done quickly.
Yeah,
And what ends up
that's the
happening with
one.
that is that it actually hinders your ability to do your job effectively and efficiently long term. And so I think another way that I see designers, developers working hand in hand with marketers is really being like that consultative approach as well, of like, hey, how can we do this in a way where it's not just going to solve today's problems, but it's going to solve the fact that like we're going to have to iterate on this thing like 100 times more, or we're going to have to
Yeah.
scale this like 15 different places, and we want to do that just as fast, if not faster. Um, and I think those are the problems that a lot of teams are being faced with today, and where I see that incredible partnership really coming to life.
Yeah, the thing that you mentioned is that like people want to build a website, like never have anyone working on it anymore, which is kind of not true. I mean, if you really want to have a pretty successful website in terms that is high conversion rate and every day all the stats that you want, you need to keep updating it all the time, which means follow the analytics, see what users want, and update based on the results. I mean, just follow the results. So that's a kind of non-ending story if you really want to have a good results. Yeah, okay. So one of the things that, because I want to try to keep it up, I mean, not to keep it up, sorry, to bring it to a close. It was very short, but yeah. So the key takeaway for marketing directors, so why they should be adopting in Webflow in 2025, that could be a pivotal step toward achieving marketing and business goals.
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing to take away is that like the pressure on marketing standing out, the way that the internet is moving has honestly like never been at this much of an accelerated and kind of crazy pace,
It's very
where
fast.
you need to compete by understanding how you can scale, and you need the tools that are going to be able to do that for your team. And I think where Webflow really comes in there is that we see ourselves as a fantastic place for marketing teams to be able to enable their non-technical members and bring in their design and development teams so we can work a lot faster together. And fundamentally, that's really the game nowadays. It's all about that conversion when you actually get somebody in there It's about competing for you being the most important tab on someone's 8 million tabs on their Chrome
Yeah.
today. And I think that's just going to become more and more of a thing. So think about your website as your front door. It's just as much as part of your product as any other part of it. And think about it this way too, is that 100% of the people who are interested and click on your website are going to hit X percentage of that first page.
Yeah.
100% of those people will never see all that you have to offer from a product perspective. So how can you do the most with that time? And that's really where Webflow and I think your marketing goals align.
Yeah, I must say that in the beginning, I didn't quite like the Webflow's approach on pushing the innovation so hard, especially when they introduced these points and everything for partners. But but later on, I understood it because this is the way. I mean, you have to do it. You have to push innovation if in order to keep innovating, keep showing up with new stuff, and competing with everybody else. But it's not just competing. If you want to produce pretty high quality stuff, you need to push it hard. Otherwise, yeah, maybe you're not gonna have another chance to do it. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. Hopefully, next time we can have if I find a different format, longer one maybe, and if you're still interested to have a conversation, maybe we can have one. So everybody, you can find Emily. Actually, where Emily people can find you online
Yeah, you can
apart from
find me
LinkedIn.
on, I guess, X/Twitter, however wish you want to
Yeah.
say it, at Emily Lonetto, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, whole shebang, all kind of under the same name. So very
Well,
happy to chat with you.
yeah, you're using so many social media. I'm using just LinkedIn. You're hopefully gonna
Yeah,
start using others as well. Okay, thank you so much for the chat, and hope you guys like this. Let me know. I will produce more content like this. Thanks.
awesome. Thanks.